Tonight's presentation is a special community program. We're offering this program in celebration of Birdability's Blind Birder Birdathon, which takes place May 3rd and May 4th. Birdability is a national nonprofit organization that works to ensure the birding community and the outdoors are welcoming, inclusive, safe, and accessible for everybody. We are also collaborating with a local nonprofit, the Go See Foundation. Their mission is to encourage, inspire, and empower those going through vision loss to remain active and engaged with their world. As part of the Blind Birders Birdathon, MCAS and the Go See Foundation will be holding a special Birding by Ear field trip. MCAS is proud to collaborate with these wonderful organizations. Now, I'm very happy to introduce tonight's speaker, Jessica Griffiths. Jessica has worked as a wildlife biologist for 25 years with a focus on birds and monarch butterflies. She moved to San Luis Obispo in 2010 and earned her master's in biology at Cal Poly University. She now works as wildlife biologist for Colorado State University's Center for Environmental Management of Military Lands at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Many of us know Jessica best as our local birding by ear expert. She leads field trips around the county for MCAS, focused on helping people learn bird vocalizations and teaching us useful tips and tricks to remember what we are hearing. We are very lucky that Jessica is part of our local birding community and that she shares her enthusiasm and skills with us. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for that introduction, Susie. I appreciate it. So I'm going to give a sort of version of a workshop that I do for annually for the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival. I just sort of call it birding by ear. Basically, the idea is tonight I'm going to present some, kind of tips and tricks on starting to learn the process of developing an ear. We're going to go over what certain birds sound like, but we're also going to just try and break down bird songs and calls into the kind of their component parts and kind of learn how to listen. And then go over some kind of mnemonics and sort of tips and tricks that I've developed over the years. So I will go ahead and get us started. So I will say that there are some parts of this presentation that I consider interactive. Like we're basically going to do a couple of activities. And so when we get to that part of the presentation, I'm going to have you guys I'm going to ask you guys questions. I'm going to have you guys put your answers in the chat. And when we get to that part, I'll pause and talk about that. So I'm kind of hoping that you guys can respond via the chat. When you do that, make sure that your chat is set to message everyone so that we can all see it. Also, if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, I will address all the questions at the end. You can type your questions into the chat and the moderators will read them out at the end. So you can please go ahead and feel free to use that. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to share and let's get this show on the road. Okay. Okay. Hopefully I am sharing the right screen. Actually, okay. Okay, I'm not hearing any different. So hopefully you guys are seeing my presentation screen. All right, great. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so first we're going to talk about bird songs versus bird calls. And bird vocalizations are divided into these two categories. And sometimes it's really easy to tell what's what, and sometimes it's not. So usually a vocalization is labeled as a song or a call based on its function rather than what it sounds like. So in temperate North America, where most of us live and do our birding, songs are usually sung by male birds, but not always. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. So the two big functions of male birdsong are to attract a mate and establish a territory boundary, and then defend that territory from other males. But there are other functions too. Songs can be used by males and females to maintain their pair bond, right, to form a connection. to identify the sex of individuals, especially in species where males and females look alike, and initiate or engage in courtship behavior. Songs are typically longer and more complex than calls. And in most species, they are learned. That means the bird is not born automatically knowing that song. It must learn the song as it grows up. And they typically learn it from hearing their neighbors, so other birds of their species singing nearby. Young birds actually have to practice for a very long time to get their song exactly right. And so they work really hard to get it right because if they don't get it right, they might not attract a female. Okay, calls are made by both males and females, and they have a huge variety of functions, really just any form of communication you can think of, alarm, pair recognition, contact calls, food signaling, like telling another bird I found food, there's a predator, flocking calls, all kinds of stuff. They're usually short and simple, and they're usually innate. Innate means the birds are born knowing how to make that sound. They don't have to learn it or practice it to get it right. Okay, so I want to touch very briefly on female song. It's actually really widespread in passerines globally. Passerines means perching birds, so most of the songbirds that we know about. And it has been discovered and uncovered in hundreds of species. It's been documented in nearly 150 North American species, including multiple species of vireos, wrens, orioles, and warblers. There's really good evidence that female song was actually the default, right? It's ancestral. That means way back, hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of years ago, it was actually females that originally sang. And the lack of female song is sort of a newer development. So why is that? Well, it's very likely that loss of female song has occurred in temperate North America because many North American species migrate to a place where they have a reduced length of breeding season. And so this has resulted in divergent sex roles. That means females and males do different things. So for instance, females incubate the nest, males defend the territory. And so because of that, this division of labor, that means the females are less likely to sing and the males are more likely to sing. So if you go birding in the tropics, where many species are non-migratory, the breeding season is much longer, and the males and the females don't really have those different roles. Both males and females incubate the nest, both the males and females defend the territory, and they both sing. So just kind of a really interesting thing. We're kind of used to male singing being the default, but it's not necessarily. It might just be sort of a quirk of our basically short summers. Okay, I want to talk briefly about how birds sing because I think it's really fascinating. Birds have a very special organ called a syrinx. No other group of animals has a syrinx, only birds. Now, they do have a larynx, but it doesn't produce sound, unlike in humans and other mammals. So we produce sound with our larynx, birds don't. The syrinx is branched into two branches, and each of those branches is individually controlled. And that means that this allows birds to create very complicated songs, right? They can make sounds on both sides of the syrinx at the same time or alternate rapidly. So it allows them to basically self-harmonize and create a really huge variety of sounds. It's a very unique and interesting organ. Okay. So when we're starting out to learn bird songs, the best thing to do is start with the most common birds and then build on that base. Learning your backyard birds gives you building blocks to build on. So I guarantee that everybody watching this Zoom knows a minimum of 5 bird calls. In fact, if you're a member of the Audubon Society, you've got a head start over most people. I bet you know at least 10. So here is a bird call that I bet a lot of you have heard before. Okay, I'm going to play this. And if you guys don't have your speakers turned on, go ahead and turn them on. You should. Okay, great. So all heard this before. This is a mourning dove. And I made a little fast list of here are common bird species that everybody knows what sounds they make, right? American crow, Canada goose, mallard, rock pigeon. These are very common birds. So there you go. You've already got 5 birds that you know what they sound like. And once you start kind of making a list of the birds sounds that you recognize, you'll see you actually already have a great foundation to build on. I love putting these 2 birds in my presentation because these are another 2 birds. You know their songs, even if you don't know that you know them. So if you've watched any TV or movies, you've heard these 2 species. So first is the red-tailed hawk, and this is what it sounds like. So this sound is played if you're watching a TV show or a movie and they show a shot of a vulture or a bald eagle or any hawk or any raptor, they're going to play that sound. It's a very sort of majestic sound. Also, just a shot of like the mountains or the desert, they play that sound. So that's the red-tailed hawk. So we've all heard that. Now, the house wren, you might not think you know this bird song, but this is very commonly played in the background. If there's, for instance, a shot of like a suburban house with a white picket fence or a backyard or like a flower-filled meadow. I hear this in TV shows and commercials all the time. This is what the house wren sounds like. So it's a very bubbly and chattery sound, and once you start listening for it, you hear it everywhere. Okay, so let's talk about learning how to listen. So a lot of birders learn visually and neglect learning bird sounds, but we can all get better at that. Many people with low vision or who are blind are used to using their ears and listening, and it's an incredible way to learn bird identification. So birding visually uses what we call field marks. Those are specific visual cues or marks on the bird that allow us to ID species. Well, we can actually do the same thing with sound. So we just have to train our ears to sort of cue into these sort of auditory field marks. And so let's break down specific things to listen to when we are hearing a bird sound like. So first thing is obviously, what does it sound like? And we can break these into categories: tone, cadence, and pitch. So what do I mean by these things? Tone is the quality of the sound. Now, this can be really subjective, right? Is it whistly, chattery, raspy, sweet sounding, nasal? What sounds like a whistle to me or a chatter to me might not sound like that to you. It's really subjective, but the key is, what does it sound like to you? Okay, so the overall quality of the sound. The cadence is the pattern or the rhythm of the sound. Is it fast? Is it slow? Does it speed up at the end or slow down at the end? Or does it speed up and then slow down, right? And last is the pitch. The pitch is how high or low the sound is. Does the pitch increase? Does it go up? Or does it come down? Or does it stay steady? Another thing to think about is the song or the call repetitive? Is the bird vocalizing in distinct phrases? Maybe it sings something, a pause, and then it sings it again, and then a pause. Kind of, you can think about that. You can also think about, what does it remind you of? Does it sound like something else? And so let's break down a really common bird song using these qualities. Okay, so I'm going to play the house finch. So let's listen together to what a house finch sounds like. And I think in this recording, it's going to sing twice. Some call notes. Okay. So probably all of us who have been out birding have heard a house finch sing. They're really abundant and they're everywhere. So how do we sort of break down this house finch song? Okay, so let's think about tone, right? The overall quality of the song. So to me, this is a very bright, cheerful song. And a thing that I've noticed is that there are sort of buzzy, burry, or slurred notes at the end of the song. Okay, so that's all part of the overall tone. What about the cadence? It's a very fast song, right? It's very rapid. It also has sort of a rolling or almost jumbled um, rhythm to it, where the bird is just kind of trying to spit it all out. The pitch is both rising and falling, right? It goes up and down, up and down. And we heard some call notes in between the two songs that were sort of rising at the end, boop, sort of questioning. Okay, so we can sort of break down the individual bird songs into these different categories and kind of start picking them apart and building a vocabulary to describe them. So, okay, now that we have some things to kind of think about, we're going to practice listening to some bird sounds. So I am going to play a bird sound for you. I'm going to play it more than once so you can hear it multiple times. Now, I'm not going to identify the bird at first because I don't want to bias you. And I also actually don't want you to focus on trying to figure out what it is. For now we're just going to focus on the sound. And as you're listening, I'd like for you to think up some descriptive words or phrases about this bird sound. So you can think about the tone, right? The overall quality. What does it remind you of? The cadence. Is it fast or slow? Does it speed up or slow down? What about the pitch? Does the pitch rise? Is it all on the same pitch? Does it fall? Does it rise and fall? Does it sing in repetitive phrases? Right? So I don't want you to answer all of those questions, but if you had to use a few words to describe this sound, what would it sound like? So that's what I want you to kind of think about. Okay. And what I would like you guys to do, I want you to kind of think about it in your head, and I'm going to play the song a few times, and then I'm going to ask everybody to sort of put their stuff in the chat, okay? But don't do it yet. So here we go. I'm going to play the bird sound. Okay. I'm going to play it again, but I want you to kind of start thinking, what are some words that you would use to describe this? I'll play it one more time. Okay. If anybody has any thoughts they want to share, you guys can put stuff in the chat. So I'll just wait a second. While you guys do that, I'll play it one more time. Okay, great. Um, okay, I'll give you guys a little bit, and if you guys don't want to put stuff in the chat, that's totally fine. So um, when I listen to this, I hear this bird sounds musical to me, right? It's a very melodic song, and it's cheerful to me. It has a fast cadence, right? And what I notice is that the pitch goes up and down, right? It's going diddly, 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 but very quickly, and it's repetitive. It's singing the same thing over and over again. Okay, so what is this bird? It's a robin, American robin. So I bet a lot of people have heard the robin sing, and it has that very distinct sort of, up and down, fast song. Okay, let's go to the next bird. Okay, this is mystery bird number 2. Um, and, um, if I'm not seeing chat messages, so if you guys, it's totally cool. The participation is optional, but if you guys want to, if you get inspired and you want to put stuff in the chat, you definitely can. So let's listen to bird number two. Okay. So that last American robin that we heard, that was that bird's song. So this vocalization is not a song, it is a call. Okay, I'm going to play it again. Okay, so if anybody wants to share any words that they kind of think about when they hear this bird song, again, you can just put it in the chat. Make sure it's going to everybody. But um, words that I think of, so I think this sounds, okay, Susie's got harsh and raspy. I like that. Yeah, I think of this as a very raspy sound, a rough sound. I also think it sounds kind of grumpy or cranky, which is anthropomorphizing a little bit, but I think the bird sounds kind of annoyed. As far as cadence, it's really just one tone, so it doesn't really have a cadence, but it is sort of drawn out. And pitch, it changes pitch, right? It goes up or sometimes down, rah, rah. Okay, so what is this bird? It's a spotted towhee. So this is the call of the spotted towhee. Okay, got another one. And let's listen to this bird. Okay. So this is for tone, again, anybody, if you want to put stuff in the chat, you can. To me, okay, Susie, I see you put ethereal. I like that. Yeah. It sounds very sort of floating, maybe flute-like. Um, the cadence is kind of irregular. And the pitch really, it sort of spirals up at the end, right? It starts a little lower and then you have this, sort of spiraling upward at the end. It's a very beautiful and unique song, and it is a Swainson's thrush. Okay, thrushes have this really sort of flute-like song, so really unmistakable. Okay, I think we've got one more, and here we go. Oh, okay. So, um, this bird, oh, Chan is disabled. All right. So I just got a notice from the mods that the chat has actually been disabled. So I apologize, everybody, for asking you to use the chat when you cannot. So that's all right. Hopefully you're just thinking of words on your own. Okay. Um, in that case, I'm just pausing for a second. If we have questions at the end, you guys can just make a note of your questions and we'll ask them at the end. You guys can come off mute. We'll make sure that that can happen. Okay. Um, all right. So this bird. All right. The tone is, to me, this is not a very musical song, right? It's kind of maybe squeaky, sort of chattery. The cadence, right? Remember, that's the rhythm. So this is a vocalization that speeds up, right? And the pitch goes down at the end, right? It started at high and squeaky and then it drops. And so this is a downy woodpecker. And that's actually one of the ways that we can remember the downy woodpecker's vocalization is that it goes down in pitch at the end. Okay, great. All right. So let's kind of move on from this. So training your ears definitely takes time. You're going to develop your own vocabulary for bird sounds, kind of what does that particular quality of song or tone sound like to you? I recommend focusing on learning just maybe one or two birds at a time, the most common birds, and then building on that. Trying to learn all the birds all at once is going to be really overwhelming. At least it was for me. So that was how I was able to do it. And of course, practice, get out there. There are apps. I'll talk about that near the end, but the Merlin app is really helpful for helping you kind of ID and practice. So just getting out there. Okay, let's move on and learn about memory tips and tricks. So there are a bunch of different ways that we can learn and remember the different songs and the calls that the bird makes. So we're going to go through these. Some birds are namesayers, very helpful. You can make up a mnemonic device or phrase. You can connect it to the sound of an object, or you can actually create a visual connection between the name or the appearance of the bird and the sound that they make. So we'll go through each of these. So some birds are easier to learn. It's easier to learn their songs or their calls because they very helpfully tell you what they are. Now, unfortunately, this is often more helpful in the eastern United States. This is because birds were named by European colonists and naturalists as they moved from east to west. And so the western counterparts to those eastern birds sometimes don't make the same noises as their eastern counterparts. So, for example, wood peewees are a great example. So here is what Eastern wood peewee sounds like. It says peewee, and so they were named wood peewees because they live in the woods and they say peewee. Now that bird has a Western relative, and that bird was therefore named the Western wood peewee. However, this is what it sounds like. Yep. They do not say peewee. So we see that this a lot. Actually, the our spotted towhees, towhees were named for eastern towhees, which actually say towhee. Our towhees don't say that, but they've got the name. Phoebes as well. Eastern phoebes actually say phoebe. Our black phoebes don't say that. They're still a species of phoebe, though. So the name saying does work for a handful of birds, though. So, for instance, chickadees. Many chickadee species helpfully say chickadee. So here's mountain chickadee. Right? Chickadee-dee. We've also got killdeer. This name is always very funny to me. Killdeer make a very loud two-syllable call, which to my ear does not sound like killdeer, but the person who named it, that is what they thought it sounded like. So here's what they sound like. Somebody thought that sounded like killdeer, but it can come in handy learning it. Okay, mnemonics. So some birds might sound like they're actually singing a phrase, and you can make up words to that phrase, and that can help you remember them. So I'm going to go through a bunch of phrases. You can use these, or you can make up your own. Let's start with golden crowned sparrow. So they have a very sort of mournful or sad sounding three-syllable song that to me sounds like, oh, poor me. Right there, it's very lament. They're just lamenting their lot in life. Next, we have California quail. The males sing a three-syllable song. Now, I am from Chicago, so to me, all of the California quails are saying Chicago. But out in California, I like the mnemonic cuidado, which is Spanish for caution or beware. So here's what they sound like. Okay. Then we have olive-sided flycatcher. And their song, you can imagine them saying quick 3 beers or quick free beer. right? So they're either buying around for their friends or maybe it's like a drunken frat guy. Okay, we've got common yellowthroat, a really beautiful native warbler. The males wear a black mask, and they have a rollicking up and down song that the mnemonic for that is often witchetty, witchetty, witchetty. So here's what they sound like. And because it's 3 or 4 syllables, you can kind of make up anything, but I learned witchetty, 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 and that really stuck with me. Okay. American goldfinches have a 3 or 4 syllable flight call. So when they take off from a tree or they're in flight, it's these sharp notes. And to me, they are saying potato chip, right? And I think I have food on the brain because our next species is mountain chickadee and their song. They have a song that sounds exactly like cheeseburger. And once I heard cheeseburger, I couldn't ever unhear it. So here it is. Yep, I'll play it again. Yep. The trees, when you go to the Sierras to listen to mountain chickadees, the trees are full of cheeseburgers. Okay. So there are a bunch of birds who make sounds that might remind us of other sounds. So they're not necessarily saying a phrase, but the quality of the sound might remind us of something else. And so you can kind of think up a description for that, and that might help you remember the song and the bird that's making it. So these are some common ones. So wren tit is very often described as their song is like a ping pong ball dropping on a table, and that is because the cadence of the song accelerates. If you think about a ping pong ball, bup, 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 bup. So here is the wren tit. Right? It's a very bouncy song, and it has that rapidly accelerating cadence. Okay, what about wrens? So marsh wrens really common in wetland areas around here, and marsh wrens have a very interesting and unique kind of mechanical sounding song, and I think they sound like an old-fashioned pedal-operated sewing machine. So here's what they sound like. Yeah, really, it's, think about those old pedal operated sewing machines where you can kind of control the speed. So they sound like that to me. Okay. Cactus wrens, which are not really found around here, but if you go to the desert in the Southwest, you will hear them singing, have also a very mechanical sounding song, but of a different nature. I think they sound kind of like a car engine failing to turn over, right? You're turning the key in the engine and it just won't turn over. So here's what they sound like. Again, not very musical. Okay, Western flycatcher. So they have a really unique whistling song, and it sounds kind of like they're whistling for a taxi. Okay, great. One more. Okay, so we hear these songs, right? And we may think of something that reminds us of. So we might hear a bird and we're like, okay, that's the ping pong bird. Or like, oh, that bird is whistling for a taxi, but which one is it? So we need to figure out a way to connect the mnemonic that we've come up with the name of the bird. And one way to do this is to basically form a chain of visualizations. That means you're going to listen to the sound. You're going to think of what it reminds you of, like words or pictures. and you're going to try to draw a link with the name of the bird. And honestly, the weirder, wilder, and crazier, the better, because you're trying to create something memorable for yourself. So what do I mean by this? Let's go through a few examples. Okay. So yellow warblers are migrating through here in the spring, and their song to me sounds like they're saying sweet, 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 little more sweet. So let's play it and hear them. Okay. So sweet, 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 little more sweet, or sweet, 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 I'm so sweet. Okay. How do I connect that to yellow warbler? Okay. Well, I'm going to think about what's something sweet that's yellow. Honey. Okay. Now I'm going to think about a bird covered in honey or dripping in honey. Well, that bird would be yellow. So that's a yellow warbler. Okay. So the yellow warbler is singing about something sweet, and I can kind of imagine like a honey covered yellow bird. That's a yellow warbler. Okay. What about our Western flycatcher? Well, I described it earlier as whistling to hail a taxi, but maybe the bird is whistling for its horse. Okay. He's whistling. Okay, so how would I connect that to the name of the bird? All right, well, maybe he's whistling for a taxi to take him down Western Avenue. Okay, maybe he's whistling for his horse like a cowboy because he's in a Western. Okay, and maybe you can imagine that cowboy using a little lasso to catch flies. Just anything. It doesn't matter how wacky or weird it is, anything to kind of cement that connection. All right, another example, soras, right? These are marsh birds, very secretive, very much more often heard than seen. Their call is like a very high-pitched descending whinny, almost like a little pony or a little horse. So let's hear it. Oh my goodness. So, okay, if I hear that and I think, oh, that's like a little whinny, okay, a horse. Horses wear saddles, and a horse might get a saddle sore, right? A sora. So, it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be something creative. Okay. So we can make up our own. I know the chat is disabled, but I want you guys to kind of think about this as we go through these. So we're going to try to come up with a description or a mnemonic device. Okay, so what does it sound like? Are the birds saying something? Can we come up with a sound name connection, right? Okay, and I'll actually show you what the birds are. So bird number one is an acorn woodpecker. Okay. Okay, so here we go. We've got very unique song, right? A lot of people have described it to me as laughter, right? It kind of sounds like the bird is laughing at you. To me, it actually sounds like Fozzie Bear, Waka Waka Waka. But either way, whether it's Fozzie Bear or sort of laughter, it's a really unique sound. Okay, so how do we connect that to an acorn woodpecker? Well, I think of acorn woodpeckers, to me, they almost look like they're wearing clown makeup, right? They have that coloration in the face. It's the bright red cap, the white on the face. They kind of look like little clowns, right? And, like clowns want to make us laugh. Fozzie Bear wants to make us laugh. So just kind of connecting that to what the bird looks like. Okay. Willow flycatchers. They have a very unique and very distinct song. Okay, so this is a really sort of wheezy, burry, kind of rough song. It's very distinct, right? It's pew pew. So some people think of it as Fitzbew, but I think of it as achoo. It sounds like the bird is sneezing, right? achoo. And something I thought up to kind of connect that sort of sneezy call to a bird is if you think about what willow does in the spring, right? The little catkins put out all that willow fluff, which flies everywhere. And if you have allergies, it's going to make you sneeze, right? So the willow flycatcher is sneezing because they're allergic to that willow fluff. Okay, bird number three is a canyon wren. They have a very beautiful song, very unique. Okay, I'll play it one more time. All right, so the pitch is descending, right? It goes down, 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 down. The cadence slows down, right? It starts out fast. If you're close enough, you can hear there's like a little raspy note at the end. And so there's different ways you can think about this bird, right? Maybe kind of a cascading waterfall. To me, it also sounds like laughter. If you're close enough to hear that final note, maybe it's somebody sort of like falling down and then kind of splat on the ground. Just different ways to think about it. And um, I like to think of it as sort of a falling waterfall, and that to me connects the idea of a canyon, right? If you imagine a waterfall flowing through and flowing down, the side of a canyon, plunging into a canyon. Yeah, okay. And then we've got one more. I always love to include this. Now, we don't have too many yellow-headed blackbirds in our area, but they do turn up. And they have a very crazy and unusual song. So here it is. So this song, it's not musical. It's very kind of croaking, raspy, groaning almost. Um, I've heard people describe it as a rusty screen door sort of swinging open, maybe even a chainsaw starting up, a cat that had its tail caught in a screen door. It's a very unique song. I really love it. And if you've ever been to a place where there's a lot of yellow-headed blackbirds, it's a true cacophony. Um, I actually haven't thought of a good mnemonic to connect, yellow-headed blackbird to this particular song, so I'm definitely open to suggestions. But it's a fun activity to kind of think about how are you going to connect the name or the visual appearance of that bird to this, mnemonic that you've thought up. So I think it's really fun. Okay, so we want to keep learning, right? Always practice, get outside, try and find the bird making that sound. Can't recommend the app Merlin enough. It's great. You can have Merlin going. It will identify the sounds that you're hearing. It's a really good way, especially when you're just starting out to learn, especially if you have a lot of birds singing around you. Merlin will sort of highlight what's singing at the moment, and it can kind of help you make that connection. And I definitely recommend starting around your backyard, around your neighborhood. What are the most common birds around where you live? What are you hearing the most? Kind of getting a handle on those and then building on that and going out. Okay. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation and I am able to take any questions. So I am going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I will let the moderators figure out how we want to do Q&A. If the chat was disabled and people can't put their stuff in the chat, not sure how we want to do it. If we just want to have people unmute, or if Bob wants to do that, I'm open to it. So mods,
They can
however you want to
unmute.
proceed.
They can unmute themselves and ask a question.
Okay, I am open to questions.
I have a question, Jessica.
Yes, Susie, go ahead.
Um, did you start birding visually first, or were you more drawn to birding by ear at first, or did it kind of go hand in hand for you as you became a birder?
That's a great question. So I started birding when I was a kid. So when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I got very into it. And then when I was in high school, I got really into it. So I was a true bird nerd when I was a teenager. And growing up, I definitely like absorbed all of the kind of most common birds around me, and I learned them just from being outside all the time. But then when I began sort of my journey as maybe a birder, I was very focused on learning what the birds look like and not as much what they sounded like. And it wasn't until I got more into kind of starting my professional career as a biologist, which was very soon after graduating undergrad. I realized that I had really neglected a very important part of bird identification, which was birding by ear and learning those songs. So I had tapes. I had the Peterson, it was actually called Birding by Ear. It was a whole set of tapes that I would listen to. Different bird jobs that I would go to. I would, make like basically mixtapes of the birds that I needed to know. I had CDs. So for me, it was kind of learning both and then really focusing on visual and then going back and focusing on sound. And now, after so many years of birding by ear, when I go to a new place, say a new state or a new country or a place where I'm not as familiar with the birds, I'm, focusing on identifying those birds by sight, but I also am listening, right? So I am trying to learn the vocalizations at the same time as the visualization. And it's a really interesting thing how a lot of birders really tend to put the emphasis on seeing the bird, right? Or, a lot of people don't count a bird for their life list unless they have seen it. They don't count it if they heard it only. And, that's a choice that people make, but I think that kind of limits you because there are a lot of species where you can very definitely identify them by sound. And so I think it kind of it just puts an interesting and maybe unfair emphasis on recognizing what the bird looks like versus what it sounds like.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you guys all so much for coming and joining the presentation. I'm sorry the chat part wasn't interactive, but hopefully you were sort of playing along at home with our sound games. So thanks again. And yeah, I guess, turn it over to Susie to wrap it up.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That's great. I like these three cues you gave us to focus on: tone, cadence, and pitch. That's very helpful. Um, Thank you everyone for being here tonight. Again, if you didn't receive your member ballot for our board vote, please email mcas@Morro Coast Audubon. I'll put that in the chat real quick. And we appreciate our members very much. And if you would like to become a member, we would love to have you. And your membership helps supports programs like this. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a lovely evening. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.